Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Her hafta farklı ülkelerden konuklarla gündemdeki konulara dair farklı milletlerin perspektiflerine yer vermeye çalışıyoruz. Bu hafta Orta Doğu'da son dönemde birbiri ardına gelen ve bölgedeki tansiyonu azaltmaya yönelik diplomasi hamlelerini, Suudi Arabistan'ın bu kapsamdaki rolünü ve elbette Türkiye-Suudi Arabistan ilişkilerini konuşacağız. Suudi bir konuğum var çok kıymetli. Suudi analist ve yazar Ali Şihabi bizlerle. Ehlen ve sehlen Mr. Ali. Thanks for joining us.
Ahlan fiki, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, Mr. Ali, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Recent photo of Saudi Crown Prince, Emir of Qatar, and National Security Advisor of the United Arab Emirates says a lot, indeed. We are witnessing diplomatic initiatives like the GCC reconciliation, the ongoing Saudi-Iranian dialogue, UAE, Egypt, and Saudi rapprochement with Turkey. So there is a clear de-escalation in the Gulf and the broader region. First of all, I want to ask you, how did we end up here after years of tension? And how regional realignments help depressurize the Middle East? Faddal.
Well, I think, look, it was in everybody's interests. Ultimately, this was a result of, 10 years of misunderstanding and different viewpoints between Qatar and her neighbors. And I think after a 3-year blockade, all parties paid the price, really. And as the environment was changing and as people realized that the United States is losing interest in the region, I think regional cooperation became much, much more important. And that led really to what we saw, which was reaching out on behalf of all parties, a discussion of the issues between them, and I think generally resolving the issues. I mean, I think we had a problem in that the issues were not well communicated to public opinion by the kingdom and by the quartet. So people never really fully understood what the problem was with Qatar. And I think in the end, those problems were sorted out, which ultimately it was a desire to make sure that Qatar does not do anything that can affect the internal security of its neighbors. And I think the Qataris understand that now.
Mm-hmm. I see. So, Mr. Ali, with the Iranians now seeking to rebuild broken bridges with the GCC, particularly Saudi Arabia, we may be entering a new era of maybe not peace, but at least better managed tensions. This is from your recent article.
Yes.
So how would you define this new era? And what are the motivations for the countries in the region to put aside their differences? And also, do you see a potential risk that these differences might cause future conflicts again, as we have seen in the blockade of Qatar?
Well, I mean, the primary issue dominating the Gulf today is Iran. It is tensions with Iran. It is Iran's involvement in Yemen, in Iraq, particularly also in Yemen and Syria. And I think the fact that dialogue has begun between the kingdom and between Iran allows tensions to be managed better. In other words, dialogue helps. And when you have dialogue, you can communicate directly, not through intermediaries. And both parties have an interest in reducing tension. Obviously, discussions with Iran so far have not led to any breakthrough. The Iranians have to show on the ground that they are willing to no longer encourage their proxies to attack the kingdom particularly. And the kingdom wants to see that action, not words, because the Iranians have made promises before. You may remember that in the days of Rafsanjani and even Ahmadinejad, an understanding was reached with the Iranian government that led to a hopeful reduction in tensions, but that did not materialize. So I think the Saudi government is looking for action and behavior more than talk. But the fact that they are talking is very important. And they have had 4 meetings.
Yeah.
And they have agreed to have additional meetings. So that in itself is a good sign, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, actually, the dialogue between the Gulf countries and Iran, because, I mean, Iran has always been a major threat for the Gulf. And also now we know that Biden administration is much softer on Iran than Trump. So you think the dialogue that began in April, I think, this process will lead to a full restoration of bilateral ties? You said you need to see action. What do you really mean? What do you really expect from Iran?
I think action means restraining the Houthis, reducing arms supplies to the Houthis, restraining the Iraqi militias who report to Iran. There is a belief that some of the missiles that have attacked the kingdom came either through Iraqi airspace or were actually launched by Iraqi militias at the instructions of Iran. So these are practical steps.
I see.
One has to see that the Iranians are walking the talk, as we say, and not just talking. The Iranians are interested, of course, in establishing diplomatic relations quickly. They have a number of objectives in that. One is to show that they are, establishing relations and reducing their encirclement. The other is to improve their access to Hajj, etc. But I think the Saudi government is reluctant until it sees action on the ground.
I see. Mr. Ali, I want to talk about, of course, Turkey-Saudi relations now, in particular. There has been an increasing tension between the two, particularly after the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey. By the way, for those who do not know, you grew up in Turkey, actually. Your father was
Yes.
Saudi ambassador in Ankara from, I think,
Yes.
1964 to 73, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
So with this
Yes.
historical personal background, how would you assess Turkish-Saudi relations? What are the major issues between the two? And these issues still matter, or they have been put aside, you think?
No, actually, I'm very saddened by the way relations have gone sour with Turkey in the last 3 years. I think the Erdogan government, when it came into power, did something which Saudi Arabia, since my father's day, had been trying to encourage Turkey, which was that Turkey is really part of the Middle East and is not part of Europe. And the message was that do not think that the Europeans will accept you. You are part of the Middle East, you are part of the history of the Middle East, and you should be an active member. Don't waste your time and efforts pretending to be European and knocking on the door of Europe, which they will smash in your face because you're a Muslim country. And I think the AKP and President Erdogan understood that. They reached out to the Arab world, they reached out to the Gulf, and it led to tremendous growth, particularly in economic relations. It led to tremendous investment, to tourism. I think the numbers of Saudis who ended up owning property in Turkey was in the hundreds of thousands. So a very good, valuable bilateral relationship was built between the kingdom and between Turkey in the last 20 years. I think that when the tragic murder of Jamal Khashoggi took place, the way the Turkish government used and misused that tragedy to embarrass the kingdom purposefully and to drag the issue out by releasing news every week to make sure that the issue was dominant in world news for a long period of time was obviously an unfriendly act. The kingdom, the crown prince, admitted that this was a horrible mistake. It should not have happened. They took action within the Saudi traditions of the way that they take action for these things. And frankly, governments have made mistakes before. I mean, Turkey herself, you know, if you go and look in history, Turkish intelligence has been involved in things like that against Kurdish dissidents, whether in the UK, whether in France, all over the world, even kidnapping Turkish dissidents. Countries unfortunately do things that are not nice. And in the case of Jamal, it was a tragedy. It was a decision that somewhere it went wrong. Something happened wrong within the action that the government took against Jamal, and really it was a shock to the whole system. So Turkey, as a friend, had an opportunity to help Saudi Arabia manage that embarrassment, if you want. But in fact, Turkey poured oil on the fire and did everything it could to maximize the embarrassment of Saudi Arabia. And that cannot be forgotten easily. And as a result, relations suffered. Commercial relations suffered, investment suffered, trade suffered. I think it was very unwise, really, by the Erdogan government to have behaved in that fashion, because ultimately Saudi Arabia was a friend of Turkey, and you look to your friends to help you when you make a horrible mistake. But Turkey did not help us. Turkey did everything it could to embarrass Saudi Arabia.
So this was a turning point for the relations, bilateral relations, you think, other than other differences like Muslim Brotherhood issue or other issues between
the two? I mean, the Muslim Brotherhood was a bigger issue, and it included Egypt and included the rest of the Arab world. But I think that this particular action, the way that Turkey behaved, and even in the investigation, the Saudi prosecutor has been asking Turkey for information which has not been shared with the Saudi authorities. So there are a lot of, the whole management of this tragedy, and it was a horrible tragedy. It was a murder. It should not have happened. Jamal did not deserve what happened to him. And frankly, the government from the king down expressed its sadness that something like this happened. But countries make mistakes.
Okay, Mr. Ali, you believe justice has... Sorry.
To Iraq and destroyed Iraq, So at the end of the day, Saudi Arabia made a horrible mistake. It cost the life of one person. Unfortunately, that person's life cannot be brought back. But within Saudi law, it dealt with his family, which are his children. It compensated them, and the children are comfortable with the way that the Saudi government handled this issue. And, that should have been the end of it. But I think Turkey did not help.
I see. By the way, how do you think this tragic murder impacts Saudi image domestically and internationally, Mr. Ali, particularly the relations with the United States also? Because there are, intelligence reports that Mohammed bin Salman has a responsibility.
These are American intelligence reports, and American intelligence reports are subjective. Even the Americans themselves say they have no evidence. It is their judgment. It is their judgment that they talk about, and their judgment has been wrong before, and will be wrong again. So I do not take the word of the American intelligence as carved in stone, really.
I see. So let's talk about the U.S. then, Mr. Ali. American presence in the region has been gradually declining, and recent withdrawal from Afghanistan was a clear sign of that. So what are the lessons for the Gulf in terms of dependency on Washington?
No, I think the Gulf has been reading has been reading the signals for many, many years now. And I think, if anything, the Afghanistan withdrawal proved beyond the shadow of a doubt that you cannot rely on America for your security going forward. American policy will be determined by American domestic politics and not your interests. And I think what that means is that the Gulf countries and all of America's allies really have to rely much more on their own capabilities and on a more diversified portfolio of alliances. Including with China, including with Russia, including with India. But the era of relying on the Carter Doctrine, which President Carter expressed so clearly in the early 1980s, is over. And that is clear.
Yeah, I want to mention specifically China, also you touched upon, because some countries seem to turn to China as a new security partner to replace what they see as an unreliable United States. I want to ask you, do you see this as a kind of a danger? What is the Saudi vision for post-American era in the region?
No, I mean, Saudi Arabia, first of all, has a very important economic relations with China because China is the largest importer of Saudi oil. So it is Saudi Arabia's largest customer. The kingdom also has a 30-year relationship with China in the ballistic missile area. China helped develop and supply the Saudi ballistic missile capability and has been upgrading them. The kingdom has cadets studying in China now. So I think has been buying drones from the Chinese. So I think it is, a alliance with China is there and will grow and will be built in many different areas. So that is going to happen irrespective. Mm-hmm. The kingdom also has a good working relationship with Russia. Russia is an important player in OPEC Plus. And I think that has been one of the successes of Saudi policy in the last 12 months, which was integrating Russia into the process and managing the oil market with the Russians. And that is also another potential alliance partner that the kingdom has built relations with and will develop. There's also India, of course, mm-hmm. and there's Pakistan, both powerful countries that have military capabilities. That the kingdom, has a history with Pakistan, of course, and is developing one with India also.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Ali, let's talk about also relations with Israel. Last year the UAE became the first Gulf country to normalize relations with Israel. What is your overall assessment of the agreement? Do you think Saudi Arabia will also follow suit, as many people expect? What might take for Saudis to join normalization process?
Well, I mean, the Saudi government has come out publicly to comment on that. And I think you have to take them at their word. The kingdom has said that it will require a substantive move on behalf of Israel on the Palestinian issue before it normalizes. I think the kingdom, given its role as the custodian of the holy places, has to move more slowly on something like this and has to demand a more substantive concession on behalf of the Israelis. We'll have to see how that plays out. Now, there are shared interests, if you want, with the Israelis versus Iran. Now, whether the Iran dialogue impacts that or not, or whether, the Iranians, in a way, by threatening the kingdom and threatening the Gulf, have opened an opportunity for Israel to come in. And the Israelis now have much easier access to Iran and to Iranian airspace than they did 2-3 years ago. So all of that will have to play out. But I think on this file, the kingdom will be more cautious than the UAE or Bahrain have been so far.
The kingdom will also be more cautious than the UAE in terms of its relations with Turkey. Mr. Ali, going back to Turkey before we close, because we have, I think, 3 to 4 minutes left. So I want to talk about relations with Turkey and what are your expectations for the future?
As I told you, I mean, I grew up in Ankara. Türkçe biliyordum.
Lütfen Türkçe devam edelim. İsterseniz Türkçe devam edebiliriz.
I forgot my Turkish, unfortunately. But it is very sad for me. But I think that the Turkish government behaved in a very unfriendly fashion and did not help its friend Saudi Arabia when its friend made a horrible mistake.
So from now on, what do you expect, Mr. Ali? Okay, the time is, time has passed. From now on, what do you expect? How do you see the future relations?
Well, we will have to see. Really, we will have to see. I am not the government, so I cannot sit and say what conditions the government will be looking for. But I can just say that there has been very bad blood created by this incident, and that will have to be addressed. It is very unfortunate, but that is a fact of life, because really. From King Faisal's days, there was a very conscious effort to, rebuild relationships with Turkey. After the end of the Ottoman Empire, when my father first went to Ankara, there were still the memories of the Arab revolt against the Turks. There were still some Turkish politicians like İsmet İnönü, for example, who didn't want anything to do with the Arab countries. And I think we came a long way. And I think the Erdogan government in its first 15 years progressed that very well. So it was very sad when that was thrown away. And I hope very much that will revert back to good relations in the future.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any message in Turkish for our audience?
Unfortunately, these are the words I remember. I also remember my phone number in Ankara, 17-27-70. That's it. I wish I remembered more. I used to speak fluent, but I was a little boy. So I have unfortunately not been able to maintain my knowledge of the Turkish language.
Hopefully,
but I miss Turkey. We have very happy memories from Turkey.
Hopefully, when you come for a visit, we will practice
Inshallah.
Your Turkish.
Inshallah.
Okay, şükran cezilen, Mr. Ali. Thank you very much. Çok teşekkür ederim for joining us. See you next time in Turkey, in Istanbul or in Ankara,
Inshallah.
let's say.
Thank you.
Ma'assalama.
Thank you. Ma'assalama.
Evet, saat farkını bu hafta da böylelikle noktalamış olduk. Suudi analist ve yazar Ali Şihabi ile konuştuk. Önümüzdeki hafta farklı bir konukla, farklı bir konuyla tekrar görüşmek dileğiyle. Hoşça kalın.